100 years ago, required reading for our students was the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. They deciphered President George Washington's farewell address, and they studied the Federalist Papers. Their history lessons were the writings of our founders and forefathers. Now, too many of our students don't even know such documents exist, or let alone what these items are. Instead, they are lectured about the horrors of America, being given an account of our history and founders by people who themselves have never read the words or works of our founders. As a result, we have generations of Americans who see nothing of value, exceptionalism, or even positive about our country. It's time we start correcting that record. Since we are approaching our 250th birthday, I say we start at the beginning, the Declaration of Independence. No country is perfect, and I'm not arguing that America is. However, we're not as completely evil as people want us to think either. In fact, we actually did a lot of things right, even if the time frame took longer than desired, and it's time to start learning that again. The truth is, we must look at both the good and the bad, celebrating what we did right and learning from what we did wrong. For example, according to the 1619 Project, patriots fought the Revolution to keep slavery. While an unfortunate number of people have accepted this version of history, it's not reality. They left out some very, very important facts. The truth is, the patriots declared independence to break free from slavery, as well as all of the other tyrannical actions of the king. And I'm going to prove it with Jefferson's own words. So, here's my 2 cents. The initial spark of the revolution was struck in 1765 with the Stamp Act and the cry of no taxation without representation. However, colonists still spent 10 years trying to peacefully resolve their grievances with the king before picking up arms against the redcoats, who were actually coming for those arms. A year after the bullets started flying, a Second Continental Congress convened to determine our course of action. Citizens throughout the colonies had already pledged support of revolution, so delegates representing the colonists met to make it official. 5 men were chosen to work on the document that would declare our independence from the mother country: Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. Of those 5, Jefferson was given the task to actually draft the Declaration, with Franklin and Adams contributing with corrections, additions, and changes before presenting the document to the entire Congress for discussion and approval. First and foremost, the delegates understood for their declaration to hold, it must be unanimous, which is why they stated the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Next, the delegates acknowledged our right to separate from a government who is denying its people the rights the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. To which Jefferson declares,
"We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
This statement is one of the most important, most impactful pronouncements ever made in history. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Jefferson is saying our rights are not given by the government. They are obvious to everyone. That all men are created equal. Yes, Jefferson meant all men, or mankind, which I will expand on in a moment. Endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Not only were Jefferson and the founders professing God and stating He provides our rights, they're declaring the government therefore can't take them away. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson borrowed this phrase from Enlightenment theorist John Locke. Now, those in the Enlightenment movement did believe Africans were inferior, Because of that, Jefferson proposed changing property to happiness, specifically to prevent pro-slavery advocates from being able to argue that the document supported slavery. All that being said, since the Declaration did not distinctly address slavery, many have insisted that Jefferson's statement that all men are created equal did not include blacks or black slaves. However, Jefferson's original draft proves that he absolutely did. In Jefferson's original draft, among the over 25 grievances that were included, he also detailed a powerful paragraph rejecting King George III's forcing slavery on the colonies.
He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither.
Jefferson criticized the king for not only enslaving an innocent people, but for also terminating the colony's every attempt to abolish it.
This piratical warfare is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. Determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold, he has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable, or detestable, commerce.
Jefferson furthered his verbal thrashing by denouncing the king for then turning those people that he enslaved against the very people desiring their freedom.
He is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us, and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, by murdering the people upon whom he also obtruded, or forcefully thrust, them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people, with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another.
If you look at Jefferson's own handwriting, you notice he emphasized the words Christian and men, calling the king out for claiming to be a Christian while enslaving innocent people. He punctuated that these people were in fact men by capitalizing the entire word, recognizing slaves as humans, not property or lesser beings. Jefferson's opening statements about the Creator, inalienable rights, and equality set the stage for this admonishment, stressing that they, as God-fearing Christian men, did not agree with slavery. Unfortunately, it became apparent South Carolina and Georgia would not agree to this reprimand, threatening the United Colonies front and jeopardizing the unanimous support for independence. If there was any area where the king could persuade a colony or two to break from the Patriots, he would have used it, which would have with almost complete certainty defeated the Revolution. Therefore, Jefferson reluctantly removed the paragraph regarding the king, making the colonies slaves to slavery, at least for the time being. Most of the founders believed once independence was achieved, citizens and states would start abolishing slavery themselves, and in 1777, they were proven right when the independent territory of Vermont outlawed slavery on their own. Over half of the original 13 colonies started phasing out or outright eliminating slavery by 1804. As part of the Peace of Paris Treaty in 1703, which officially ended the Revolutionary War, Britain surrendered the Northwest Territory. As Congress formed regulations for possible new states in this territory wishing to join the Union, Jefferson again pushed for freedom for all as he authored the Land Ordinance of 1784. The document outlined 5 main principles, with the first 4 addressing the new states' standings and responsibilities to America. The 5th article abolished slavery and all involuntary servitude in the new states after 1800. Again, 2 Southern delegates, 1 each from the Carolinas, moved to strike Jefferson's slavery clause, triggering an approval vote for the article. It failed by 1 vote. In Jefferson's disappointment, he commented, "The voice of a single individual would have prevented this abominable crime from spreading itself over the new country. Thus we see the fate of millions unborn hanging on the tongue of one man. The heaven was silent in that awful moment. Regardless, he helped author the second ordinance before being sent to France as a U.S. ambassador. The third and final ordinance was passed on July 13, 1787, using portions of Jefferson's original 1784 document, including the provision stating the Northwest Territory would be slave-free. However, this time it would be effective immediately. Originally approved under the Articles of Confederation, Congress reaffirmed the final Northwest Ordinance of 1787 under the U.S. Constitution, with President George Washington signing it in 1789. In addition, the Continental Congress gave the country the authority to abolish the international slave trade starting as early as 1808 as part of Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution. As president, Jefferson began action in 1806 with Congress passing the Act prohibiting importation of slaves on March 2, 1807. Jefferson signed it the next day, with it taking effect on January 1, 1808, the earliest it could have happened constitutionally. While it did not end slavery, it was a significant step in the right direction by abolishing the importation of new slaves. Despite not directly addressing slavery, the document agreed upon by the founders in 1776 still represented an unprecedented declaration, proclaiming men's rights are from our Creator, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The Declaration of Independence and Constitution were not the means that cemented slavery. They were the promise and the tools for future generations to break the chains of it and fulfill America's promise of liberty, freedom, and equality for all. The words, all men are created equal, were not limited to a specific group of individuals, as many insist you believe. These words were the foundation for voices like Wentworth Cheswell, Mum Vett, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King Jr., and many others in their fight for their rights and freedoms, as they realized those words applied to them too. They didn't abandon the Declaration in their cause. They used it as their cornerstone. The Declaration was, and is, not the problem. It's the people with their own agendas of collectivism and Marxism, self-righteousness, and the Enlightenment mindset of superior intellect who stand in the way of the Declaration and the Constitution, who want to torch the means by which our forefathers gave us to actually correct the injustices of their time. Those I mentioned before did not fight against the Declaration and the Constitution, demanding their eradication. They fought and won their fights with the Declaration and the Constitution. Once we realize that truth and start using those tools instead of trying to burn it all to the ground, we can become the nation the founders hoped and promised we would, with freedom and justice for all. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think? Leave your comments down below. You can find many more stories of American history and our heroic patriots in my blog, Liberating Letters, on thefactspaper.com, along with other videos I have published. And thank you for watching.